I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. How's the day treating you? Where you located out of?
I'm in Greenville, South Carolina. I was
Oh,
about to ask you the same
beautiful,
thing.
beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm in
Have you
Nashville.
been? Oh, you're not
I've
too
been a
far.
long time ago. Greenville. My brother was born in Columbia, uh,
Okay.
but I used to go to a small Christian school, and they are all about Bob Jones University, which is near
Mm-hmm.
Greenville.
Yep.
And
Yep. Yep.
everybody's like, "You got to go to Bob Jones." It's like, no, I'm just not against it. You know what I mean? It's just like, but
Yeah.
yeah.
That's too funny.
But
I have
it's
a handful of friends that have gone there, so I'm pretty familiar.
yeah, it's no problems with it. I just was probably it's because I was always a wallflower anyway, so I was thankful that like I'm not gonna hopefully be the kind of guy that gets into any type of trouble. I think I'm pretty tamed. I mean, pretty tamed and
Yeah.
stuff like
No,
that. So
I hear you. I don't blame you. I actually moved here 2 years ago, from Boston. So
oh
I'm a northerner. My family's in New Jersey. I went to college in Boston, stayed there for a few years after graduation, and then decided to venture down south about 2 years ago. So I'm still relatively new, you could say.
wow, yeah, Boston,
Big change.
yeah, it's a big change. Do you like it? You like it pretty well?
I do. I do. The
Yeah.
people are so much friendlier. There's more, I feel like, outdoorsy things. I mean, the Swamp Rabbit Trail here in Greenville is unreal. I don't know if you remember that, but
I don't remember, not because I love to go back. The last time I
you
was
should
in
come
South,
visit Dr. Motley. I'll be here, so let me know.
I'll let you know. I mean, I really do get like I was supposed to go see Court. She does like some of the podcasting with me, and
Yeah, yeah,
Court's out
yeah.
in Charleston. And then,
Okay.
but I'm saying like sometimes I come out there. I have to do like North Carolina, go out there sometimes for acupuncture
Yeah.
training. So yeah, it's cool though. I mean, I'm all about like trying out to go new places, but I'm really like glad that you enjoy the South though, because sometimes like people
I
honestly
know.
they come to the South and um like they'll have expectation like from the North. Like some people like I just don't like the Southern culture. I'm like, man, I've been to a lot
Yep.
of places in my life. I lived in the Midwest. My mom lived in Florida. I lived here. I
Yeah.
have a place in Florida because one of my best friends lived down there, and I like because a lot of people from the South, from the Nashville, live there.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
to me, I'm just like I'm a loner anyway, but I still like friendliness to say hello, how are you? Like
Right?
hold the door
Yeah,
open for a lady, instead of them
exactly.
looking at you all weird like, oh, what I've had people do that like in other cities. I was in Philadelphia one time. This lady was
Yeah.
like, oh, and I was like,
It's
oh,
so true. But the funny thing, Dr. Motley, is like I didn't really like it becomes more apparent after you leave a place and then return. Like I didn't really think too much of it while I lived in Boston, and then whenever I go back up there for work or whatnot, it's just the difference is so apparent. Like there's no
yeah,
eye
yeah.
contact, no just casual hellos. But
And you can tell around here because a lot of people they move here because they like it, but they're not used to it, and they are like in their I'll say northeastern, but even the West Coast, and you can
yeah.
tell them from the norms because they'll be walking around with their head low, and they'll just be like,
Yep.
instead of like just hey how you doing, and they're just like,
So
well, what do
true.
they want, and I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
that's how it
It's
is. So
funny, but no, I'm enjoying it, and yeah, Charleston's about 2.5 hour drive for me, so you could
oh,
hit
that's
up
not
both
bad.
spots when you come visit. Yeah, not
Definitely.
bad.
How far are you from the beach? Like just not too far, like an hour and a half, two
Um,
hours.
well, about three,
Okay,
probably. Yeah,
that's
two.
perfect.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Oh,
I
you
brought
get
my parents
trees.
to Isle of Palms last summer,
Oh
which is
yeah,
one of my favorite beaches. I don't know. Yeah, it's unreal, but
yeah.
everything's here.
Yeah, you don't have to go too far. So
Yeah,
well, I'm
exactly.
happy for you, and I'm glad you allowed me to come on your show, and
Oh
I
my
I
goodness,
really mean it.
yes.
You know I know that I talked to Josh. Josh came in 2 days ago.
Oh, nice.
Josh was in town for his mastermind. I'm part of his mastermind, but I didn't get to
Yeah,
go because I see it so busy. I told him like, man, to schedule off 2 days off work with
it's a
patient
lot.
load,
I'm
ain't no
sure.
way. I mean,
Yeah.
but it was good to see him, and I just talked to Jordan Rubin. He used to do like him and Josh friends. I talked with them yesterday, and
Yeah.
just good to catch up.
I love that. Well, this is an honor for me. I had Dr. Axe on and now I have you, two of my favorite people. So I'm
Oh,
truly
stop it.
though,
I
it's
appreciate it.
true. I've been following your work and listening to you and Courtney on the Ancient Nutrition podcast for years. So I feel like
Oh,
I know much more about you than you know about me,
you
but
probably
hopefully
do. Probably not how much of a goofball I am. So if I go into goofballdom right now, I'm so sorry. But yeah.
No, I'm a huge fan of all of your work, and quite honestly, Dr. Motley, it was a struggle for me to narrow down what I wanted to focus our conversation around.
Oh,
So I hope you don't mind, but we are going to be jumping around a bit, but I
yeah,
promise it all relates, as you very well know.
totally. Yeah, you let me know. I mean, I'm easy breezy. Like, hopefully, I can give you some good answers or good
Yeah,
thoughts. I just like a good conversation. I don't want it to be like one
a
sided. But
100%. No, I'm the same way. And I don't know if you had a chance to check out Well and Strong too, but I started my blog. It started out as a blog back in 2020
hmm
from my mom's journey with stage 4 breast cancer, and I started this podcast a year ago in May. So it's been exactly a year, Dr. Motley, that I've been doing this, and I'm still a novice, but I've been enjoying it so much. It's just an incredible way to, speak with people like yourself whom I've admired for
it
so long, and it's been so much fun.
it is it's an experience to take a blog and take your written word and realize how much therapy it can be for yourself. Like
100%.
I find that you actually people say you find yourself, but really is there some deeper caverns in your heart that you go, I never thought I thought about life that way until
Right?
somebody told me or till I wrote it. That's how I felt. And I'm like, huh. And
Yeah.
that's how the podcast, because Josh is doing a lot more podcasting on like his part, and then we're
Mindset.
doing ours.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's parts of it that they want me to do some of my own stuff, and I may do it, and but I'm here at the office all day, working, so
Yeah.
kind of
You
tough to do
should.
it, you
There's
know.
just I'm just amazed. I always learn. There's always something new I'm learning from you. Like
Oh,
it's there's no truly though. Like there's always something. So you're just a wealth of information. I highly encourage you to do that. I'll be number one of your number one listeners.
oh, I appreciate it. I just sometimes I wonder. I'm like, am I just giving out a whole bunch of useless facts or figures or something? But there's part of it that's like, how can you make things practical? And
100%.
I think it's all about investigation when we do podcasts. I think that,
It is.
if I can't quote solve the problem, I'd rather be able to give you information that lets you lead you to the person. And that's my goal. That's what I do in the office. I mean, I work on a lot
Yeah.
of things, but yeah.
100%. That's the mission of my platform is to encourage readers to be advocates of their own health, and you do that through empowering them with knowledge, right? So
That is exactly right.
the more
And,
facts they have, the better.
and I could say something like one time, like you see it all the time, right? You write a blog and sometimes you're like, well, I wonder what this is going to do. And then you'll get like 6 people that says, oh my word, that's what I needed.
Yeah.
As opposed to I want 1,000 of them saying that. And you're like, no, one of those 6 people changed their lives. And I'm like,
100%.
I got to remember that. I got to
Yeah.
remember that. Yeah.
That's why we do what we do. That's why I love connecting with people in the health space because I mean, yeah, you just folks like that and yeah, couldn't
Yeah.
agree
You
more.
keep doing it. You got a gentle heart. You just keep doing it and keep rolling with it. Okay.
Thanks,
And
Dr. Molly. I
you
will.
keep rolling. Okay.
No, I
You're good.
appreciate that. Well, I'd love to first start in asking you how you found yourself in this very unique space of employing practices like frequency healing and Chinese medicine when it comes to treating patients and really assessing the root cause of disease.
Oh, that's a good question. I love frequency medicine. And I'll tell you my first introduction to it. And most people may not know this, but there are machines that really can measure the frequency off of individuals. And I say measure them, but you can take the person's voltage from their skin. Okay. So you have electricity running through you, and that voltage can put off different amounts of electromagnetic waves and biofields around the body. When I got into it, I didn't necessarily know what that was. My dad had a friend that had a radionics machine. Now, if you tell individuals and people who are listening today would be like, what in the world are you talking about? There's a really cool website called Kelly Research Tech. It's like actually the machines that can, they're called radionics machines. Now, some people love the idea of using radio waves to actually measure frequencies off the body. Some people don't. But the biggest thing was this. My dad's friend who was, and I would say this, he was a guy just from the South. And I'm not saying that, he was a Southern man that just, you wouldn't expect him to know anything about frequency medicine, but he had gallbladder issues. And he had a gentleman come to his church and he had this machine. And with the machine, he said he used the frequencies from the machine to help his gallbladder heal. I was like, what are we talking about? And then my dad had liver issues. Like my dad had gone to the emergency room because what we found out eventually was that my dad had really bad liver flukes. He had tons of parasites in his liver and he had a lot of sugar handling issues.
Hmm.
But my dad was able to help his liver by using a machine. Now, this is the kicker. At the time, I didn't really know what that was. And I was like, man, you can use somebody's voice imprint. They're literally their voice signature to get an idea of what's going on in the body. And fast forward, so the listeners don't get bored out of their minds. But when you start to look into that kind of framework, you think we're more than just the structure. We have more electricity and information running through our system. And that's what really intrigues me. So when I got into this space, I was going to chiropractic school. I had gotten into a car wreck literally 2 weeks before I went to school. 2 weeks.
Wow.
Got rear-ended really bad.
Boy.
Go to school. My neck would not stay in place. Like I was like, great, I'm having migraines before I go to chiropractic school. Start getting getting chiropractic care, which is great. But my C1, C2 vertebra kept slipping out of alignment. And I know many people out there go, that's me. That's what's happening. Well, get this. I go to school first month, 3 months, and you have a clinician, so you have somebody taking care of you. But my neck would keep going out. One of my friends up the street did this form of kinesiology that we do here at the office. My mentor, Dr. Dowdy, uses different devices called biofeedback to measure certain frequencies that come off the body. Well, my friend Brian, Steve, his last name is Brian, but he goes, hey, I want you to try this technique. He goes up he takes me to the clinic, but he's treating me off site. And so he looks at me and he's like, well, your neck problem's not really your neck. It's really your gallbladder. And I was like, what do you mean my gallbladder? And Chinese medicine, he says on this area, if you look at the Chinese medicine chart and people who are watching, it starts at the edge of the eye and it goes around the ear, the meridian line, it goes down through the shoulders and through the neck, but it goes right through the neck and through the TMJ. And I always had tight TMJ, always my whole life. So he worked on that through 2 days, maybe the second or third day, I had like rigor mortis. My body went into this tightness. I was like, oh my word, this is crazy. I'm feeling all this stuff drainage. And I was sleeping 13 hours at a night. I never sleep that long, maybe 7 hours. And I woke up the third day and my neck felt so good. I was like, oh my goodness. I was like moving my neck around. I was like, frequency medicine. And then I was like, wait. And so if you tell me that if I was going to go to school and no the word knock on anybody that's doing a certain technique, but if all I had to do was just keep kind of like just doing the same routine on patients all day, every day, I couldn't do that. I'm just not wired like that. And when I started to learn that you can measure frequencies off the body and utilize different areas to find out what it is, like you could find out it was parasites, yeast, mold, viruses, fungus. It could be a structural misalignment that leads to your pancreas being out of alignment, or that pancreas has a worry conflict that's with your mother. And you've gained it through genetics, and you think I could get a parasite because my pancreas is weak because my mom's genetic coding. Yes, that stuff intrigued me. And so with all that to say, Jacqueline, when I learned that, I started to work on people in the clinic. And if you see some of the people that come into the office every day here, finding the frequencies, like, for instance, and I'll let you jump in. I'm taking over too much.
No, this is
But
interesting.
when you look into somebody has like chronic neck issues, like I just got done working on a patient this morning before we jumped on here. And if I would have gone the normal route, which is great, we do x-rays, which are needed. And, you have to have certain types of examination. Every time we'd work on the lymph nodes around the throat and work on the meridian system around the TMJ, which is gallbladder and small intestine, she would drain profusely, like just overall. And she's like, sometimes she feels really great. She goes, I'm feeling really toxic. But with the biofeedback, I go in and check the neurological tooth. I go check the current around the teeth. And I'm like, oh my goodness, these areas are really lit up. You need to go to a biological dentist. Goes there, 3 out of the 4 areas where she had wisdom teeth full of infections.
Cavitations, yeah.
All cavitations. Now, if it was just me, you know as well as I do, you studied cavitations. You go, well, it's just neck pain and you're going to live with it for the rest of your life. It's like, no, as long as you have that, and I didn't find the frequency off of it, she'd just stay in pain. So I'm thankful that frequency medicine, people say, what's frequency medicine? Literally taking the biofield and the current off the skin and learning how it's digitized. Like, how can we give a representation to a number, and then finding that frequency range, like let's say from 400 to 420 little microhertz. Like, you thinking, what does this all mean? Certain infections live in those ranges. And if you can identify that they are in that frequency range in a certain area of the body, you can estimate that there is an infection probably that lives in that frequency range in that area. Does that make sense? So
interesting.
Oh, they're at 420. And I'm like, they got yeast.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So I hope that was a big, long caveat to guys, get into frequency medicine. It's the way of the
Yeah.
future. And I'm talking a lot now, guys, but just think about it. Certain places and hospitals around the country use ultraviolet lights, right? They literally flash light to kill off infection.
Right.
And the beauty of it is this: you can take a light source and you can use that to disrupt the metabolism of a bacteria.
Mm-hmm.
That is amazing to me. And
Yeah.
that's just hitting the edge. I think that we're on the brink of more frequency medicine. The other part of it is I think that they're going to try to monetize it, and that's why they're going to make it. They could. I'm not going to go into that realm, but
I That
uh,
could be a whole conversation in
yeah,
itself,
totally.
Dr. Motley.
So
But the thing
yeah,
I love, no, that was a super helpful and really fascinating explanation. But the thing I love is I feel like all of the quote unquote like hot areas that us folks in the holistic and alternative space are talking about now, it'll probably take another decade or so before like conventional medicine actually kind of jumps on the train and it actually starts to explore it.
yep.
But I mean, this stuff it's ancient. It really is ancient, and I think the
Mhm.
technology now is evolved such that we can actually see there is truth to it. And I had a Dr. Tony Jimenez. I don't know if that name rings a
Does
bell.
ring a bell? Yes.
He founded the Hope for Cancer clinics. I had him
Yep.
on the show, I don't know, a month or so ago. And one of the most interesting parts of our conversation was when he was talking about the frequency of a cancer cell and how you can actually measure it and just the energy around it. It's dark. And, when you expose it to light and oxidation and it dies. And I just think like, that's a whole other aspect of cancer, right? That
Mhm.
that folks don't necessarily really think about. And it's so fascinating.
It is. It's like when you think about how cells have certain vibrations, and vibrations will emit certain wavelengths, and he's like, it's devoid of certain colors, and
Yeah.
certain cells have certain wavelength patterns. But remember, if
Yeah.
wavelengths can actually be shortened, they'll create sound.
Exactly.
And it's if you're in cancer form, like you say, anything like you could have high amounts of bacteria, strep, or a cancer cell, and they're having a certain vibrational pattern, and that influences the area around it. Like you just said, like it could be darkness. Can that be in a spiritual aspect of saying, does it make the whole body dark? Could. I would suspect so. And I think that's why, I love to hear that conversation, because the more and more I study about vibrational patterns and tones from certain types of cells, it's even more interesting. It's that if you create a sound or use a wavelength, it's just like music. They call it the out of phase, right? If you take one wavelength and across and overlay it with another pattern that's the complete opposite
Yeah.
of the wave, you'll cancel. So it can work that way. Or you can take a wavelength or light pattern and actually amplify the signature so high that it pops the cell open.
Yeah.
And that's less invasive than doing like too much chemical intervention, too much
Right.
radioactive intervention. And I'm no way I'm knocking anybody that does those. So please know that. But it is
Yeah.
interesting though, isn't it?
I love that you touched on that. So, I mean, again, we could chat for hours, but just on this topic, I was with my mom for the past several weeks, just doing a bunch of different complementary and alternative therapies for cancer, and she basically did a lot of these machines for the first time. She did the Rife machine, which I'm sure you've heard about,
Hmm.
and she also got to experience, and I did as well. One device, it was like super tuning colors and biocybernetics, which
Oh,
basically consisted of a series of different sounds and colors to super tune areas of your body. So I like would touch this device, and on the computer it would show all the areas of my body that were quote unquote out of balance or deficient. And then for an hour, Dr. Motley, I would just sit there with headphones on and be listening to different sound frequencies and have different light patterns on my forehead. And
oh,
like, and it was just like, and it was incredible. And after that experience, I mean, whether it was placebo or not, I felt so much better. But then when you actually read into the science behind it and you hear conversations like ours, you realize there's actually a lot going on beneath the surface of these simple modalities.
it is. It's. I love like when you say you touch that, and I think people are going, "What? What are you guys talking about?" But like you
Right.
always say, like the visible spectrum is Roy G. Biv. Remember we lived in that in like the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And they say like the chakras in certain areas of the body, and I can get into that, and people think it's odd and unusual. To me, it's not. But when you look and say how well a color can represent or the vibrational pattern, but isn't it cool? Like in Chinese medicine, like the red would be the fire element, like what
Yeah.
brings metabolism, what makes you have a lot of energy. And that's at the very root of the body, near the testicles, near the ovaries. That's where you're going to get your fire and a lot of your mitochondria. But if you move up and it goes to like the green area right in the middle of the area where it's like near your gallbladder and your liver, it's like, what is biocolored? Green. You go to the stomach. What is chime? And what is chime? It's like yellow.
Right.
And see, you know what I mean? And then you think you could use a light source, a color, to find out if you're actually in production of the fluid that would make you
Yep.
actually healthy. And people are thinking, no, that's odd and unusual. I'm like, not at all. It's like kind of simplistic in some way, you know?
It is. Yeah. Yeah. So
I love it.
interesting. And I've also, yeah, you would have loved this room. It was basically filled with all these different machines, most of them from Germany, and they were all just, yeah,
So
it would be your
it's,
heaven.
yes, cybernetics, like, because have you ever heard of Causinta? It's a place down in Arizona. And
No.
one of my patients, Ted, they had a similar device, but he had Lyme disease so bad that when he got parasites when he was 12, and it was so bad, Jacqueline, that it fused his bones in his elbows. And
Mm,
he got stem cells and it helped him out. But like, you know, if your mother went through those sicknesses and you see how much they decline, but he went there and they were doing different light sources, because when they're measuring you and they see the health of the condition, the beauty of light sources and frequency medicine and vibrational patterns is that if there is so much adaptation in the tissue where the tissues harden up, where it's hard to get the herb in there, or hard to get the tincture in there, hard to get there, it's
yep.
like he needed light source because there were areas that his babesia was so deep. I'm like, they're going to have to use certain juices. His other Chinese medicine
Right.
practitioner that has the color to pull it out and the light source to go in. And the guy's gained 10, 15 pounds, getting stronger. And I'm like,
Yeah.
the wave of the future. I can go on other stories about that. There's
I
another
know.
device I saw in Poland that was amazing that got people out of their Lyme in like 2 or 3 weeks. So
Wow.
we'll keep talking, but
Yeah,
I digress. Yeah.
we'll touch on that because that was
Yeah.
part of my protocol too. And even when it comes to breaking up biofilms, like I'm sure there's a lot of power there.
Oh yeah.
Um, but I've heard you say too that even electricity helps the arteries and lymph nodes flow.
Mhm.
And I am really curious, Dr. Motley, from what you've seen, you've obviously worked with thousands of patients. What are some of the top most responsive, you could say, chronic diseases when it comes to using frequency therapies?
Um, to me, I would say the top would be anything that has to do with chronic infections that namely have to do with the cranium. So anything that's
Hmm.
neurodegenerative. So I'd say diseases like Lyme disease have been very, very responsive, very well. Parasitic infections of the brain and of the heart, and strep. So I want to categorize it. So if people out there are
Yeah.
wanting to know, it's like Lyme, parasites, and strep. Epstein-Barr virus has done really well using frequency medicine to identify. And I think that those are top three infection categories.
Mhm.
Frequency medicine has to do with, like I say, categorizing like an autoimmune. I'm not saying it cures it. I'm just saying that I've seen issues with lupus being cleaned up. Hashimoto's is a big one. I've
Wow.
seen patients go into full remission on that. Um, I've seen patients that have had autoimmune that, well, I can't say it here, but I'd say people that have had different types of bone conditions that have really resolved only because frequency medicine was used to actually identify methylation issues where they had
Hmm.
vitamin D upregulation issues and they could
Interesting.
not use the vitamin D. I hope I'm not going too far off the beaten trail, but um, and rheumatoid. And this is the thing. I'm not saying with rheumatoid, but rheumatoid being identified when people had chronic severe fungus of the lungs and of the heart, and the
Mm.
family line had it.
Wow.
Then they found it medically and cleaned it out, and all the rheumatoid went away.
Wow.
Um, emotionally, um, I think that some of the top things is learning the spinal and finding through frequency the spinal levels that are so locked up from your emotional fatigue
Mm.
that your brain suppresses it that I cannot register it because I'm too tired. That's a very good. Like people do EFT tapping, but I use frequency
Yeah.
medicine to find the areas of the body that are locking that up. And I will say this though, top conditions. In my opinion, I think I do pretty good at strengthening up heart conditions, bladder conditions, and kidney conditions. I think I'm pretty good.
Interesting.
And tonsil. I know it's a lot, but I'm telling you, like sometimes, like for instance, and people out there listening, what does this all mean? Patients will come in and they'll have heart palpitations, chronic chest tightness. They'll have AFib, and they have to get a procedure to get it to clean up.
Mm-hmm.
But if you use frequency medicine, you can find the areas not only in the spine, but the lymph nodes that are actually they're blocked and they can't get a lot of signal to the brain. But you'll find through frequency the hidden, those subtle frequencies that are related to certain infections that the person probably had as a kid.
Hmm.
And you don't have to be the person to solve it, but you could say, oh, they had strep. Did you have mono? And they'll go, oh, yeah, I had mono like 4 times. And then, it's just disregarded. Oh, he had mono back then. And I was like, no, you go get a blood test and get it really checked, and you'll find strep all over the person. That's the beauty of this frequency medicine to me. And then we just find the earth to clean it up, and you start working on spine. They're like, no more AFib.
Yeah. That's so interesting. And I'm sure like you also uncover a lot of other co-infections. Like I've read that Lyme specifically and mono, like if someone has a mono, they probably will have a Lyme infection. Yeah.
Lyme, Ehrlichia, Rickettsia, Babesia, Bartonella. Right. The best is when somebody comes in and they've, and I love all the testing out there, and I do it on my Instagram and Facebook and such, but they're like, okay, where's this Babesia? But there's like, I have, we try to test for frequencies of like 60 to 70 different types of Babesia.
Yeah.
And so you find those, or when we talk about like Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus, herpetic viruses, they're all herpetic. And then also if somebody's had adenoviruses, I know I'm going down the rabbit trail, but man, wow. You could ask somebody if they had chronic junk in the back of their nose and throat when they were a kid.
Yeah.
And they had to get their adenoids taken out in their tonsils, and they think it's gone.
It's not
Sorry.
gone.
They're still there.
Yeah.
And they're always going to have chronic allergies and chronic sinusitis and chronic bronchitis until you clean it.
Yeah.
So
that's crazy.
Yeah.
So interesting. I'd love to just like come into your office and shadow you and just like be a fly on the wall in all of your conversations with patients, because I bet I'd learn so much.
Jacqueline, you'd be there and you'd be like, no wonder you don't have many friends. You just sit here and talk about parasites all day and infections. I'm like, it gets ingrained.
I love it. But you know what? You're so passionate about it and you're helping so many people, and it's not work for you, right? It's your passion. And I feel the same way when I discuss, when I have conversations like this, like it's just your passion,
Yeah. It livens you up a bit because you can see like, how when people suffer, you're saying is like, right. It's like when people suffer, you see how our systems in our country are set up to where they're just not investigating. And then when you can see that something could help somebody, you're like, oh, exactly. please listen to this. Please go to this, Yeah.
And it's life-changing, right? Like good health. It's life-changing. But going back to emotions, you talk a lot about emotions. This is one of my favorite topics to discuss when it comes to the pathology of disease, specifically with cancer. But you've also spoken a lot about the unique energy frequencies associated with the different emotions. And I know that in Chinese medicine, different emotions are correlated to different organs and elements. So with that in mind, what role does acupuncture play when it comes to addressing emotional strongholds that contribute to disease in the body?
Oh, it has like most everything in my opinion, but I would say that, how can I put this so I don't get overwhelming to myself and to the listener? But when you're looking at emotional fatigue, I always try to explain it to my patients that each organ is correlated to a particular emotion because the organ has biochemistry, hormones, neurotransmitters that normally that organ emits or releases in response to the particular emotion that you're experiencing. Does that make sense? So if you told somebody that the stomach is related to over concern or being worried or caring more about somebody else's emotion than yourself, then the neurology of the body would say, okay, the stomach doesn't need to produce a lot of acid to break down food. I'm going to take the excess energy because I'm overstimulated and put it into my fight or flight apparatus, right?
Yeah.
So each emotion, when you find somebody that's chronically worried or chronically over concerned, like the mothers that love their kids, the fathers that love their kids, and you're like, I would rather help my kid out before I feel better because I feel better if my kid feels better, which is the norm. I get that. But what you're doing internally, and hopefully people they're following along. When your brain tells your body that I'm okay, I'm fine, don't worry about me, I'm worried about my kid, you will signal to your spleen and your white blood cell production that you don't have to go out and send all the antibodies out. Bring it all
Hmm.
back in, because I got to take care of my kid before I take care of myself. I got to take care of the people in my family, which is great. I'm not saying that it isn't. But if you do that over time, your brain gets that program pattern and the stomach gets weak. And that's what we call Chinese medicine. That's why I love it. It's called spleen stagnation, chi
Hmm.
stagnation. There's not a lot of energy in the area because it's going to the extremities and going to go fight or flight or think out of a problem. So when I look at your tongue, I'd go, oh, there's paleness in the area that's represented in the stomach and spleen. And there's swelling around the area because your spleen has to work harder. I hope this makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you look at a person and you say the emotions and the frequencies that are given off of it, you can then say, you can ask them the question, like you say, I'm a mother and I'm really worried about my kids all the time. This person will usually experience more issues with Epstein-Barr virus or strep or having a swollen spleen or
Hmm.
blood sugar issues because it's also spleen pancreas. Those are the two organs, right? You probably have had that. You're
Interesting.
like, oh yeah, I've had blood sugar issues and I
I
get
mean,
the
I
shakes.
worry about my mom a lot, so
Yeah.
not surprised.
And and if you look at the tongue, there's a split down middle of my tongue because I had a stomach surgery, Jacqueline, in 2017,
Hmm.
because I'm always over concerned about my mom and about things like that and my patients.
Yeah.
So each organ, I just want people to know this. Please don't look at Chinese medicine as woo woo, because if you
Yeah.
think about it, around each organ is fascia. And they basically are connective tissue, and that connective tissue transmits electrical signals. And in the Chinese medicine world, that electrical signal with the water and the proteins of the fascia is what carries the emotional signals, which indicates to the organ, kick in.
Yeah.
So with all this to say, whenever you start to use needles to redirect the energy and to basically engulf that organ in energy, you're also going to find out the areas along the spine with acupuncture, which areas have to be open and awakened. So the brain can then also neurologically, not just fascial, but neurologically can understand what's going on within the organ. But the
Yeah.
beauty of it is, like even in German New Medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, this is the kicker for me. I always tell people, remember, the action of the organ. Many people are like, you're a biology nerd, dude. I'm not going to listen to this. I get it. But
I
if
love
you
it.
think about what an organ does, you have to equivocate that to what going on in your brain. So even if it's not going on in the organ, your brain's thinking it'll trigger the organ.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? So let's say, for instance, real quick, guys, small intestine. What small intestine do? People say, oh, it's just part of your digestive system. Like, no, it basically pulls out all the nutrients out of the food you just ate. You extract everything you can from your food. You get all the nutrients. You get fed by it. You're like, I'm getting everything out of this that I can so I can get energy.
Mm-hmm.
Then you stick it through the ileocecal valve and go to your colon and you poop it out. Okay. But what happens if you have gotten into, like, that's your colon, I mean, your small intestine. But what if you're in a relationship and you got everything you got out of it that you needed to get out of it? And now you're done and you're like, I need to put this into my colon or put it out into my waste basket because I can't handle it anymore. Now, your small intestine could be hunky dory. But if you keep signaling that to your brain, your small intestine goes, wait a minute, that's the same signal I get every time I get food down here. I have to get rid of something I processed.
Hmm.
So your small intestine gets overstimulated because you have to keep holding on to the thing you're done with.
Yeah.
And so you find people that have appendix issues and ileocecal valve
Interesting.
issues. And they're like, why is this part? Oh, it's like, because you're stimulating with your thought process.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? So
It's
always
crazy.
take the organ action and match it to what's
Yeah.
going on in your heart and your body. And it'll tell you which emotion. So hopefully that
So
didn't overwhelm the
interesting.
people out there. But
No, I find all this fascinating, and it reminds me there is this chart, and I remember seeing it before my conversation with Dr. Veronique Desaunier, who has done a lot of work with healing breast cancer naturally. And this chart, Dr. Motley, I'm sure you've seen it. It basically outlines or provides like context around women in terms of their personality types
mm-hmm.
who go on to develop breast cancer on like the right versus the left side, and how the right side was more correlated with, you know, relationship problems with a male in their life, whether that be their father or their spouse. And I find it so fascinating that when you look individually at these, women who have breast cancer and you ask them their family history, repressed emotions, they all have similar types of conflict in their lives when it comes
Yes.
to a certain side. And again, some people can look at that and say, "Oh, that doesn't mean anything," but there's a pretty positive correlation there.
It is a very big correlation, and you hit the nail on the head. Like when he says that, you can look, and I love that you just mentioned that. You can look. I do a lot of like circulation on the tongue and the hands. You can look at a person's right hand and the left hand, and I could do that with you right now, and I can tell you what probably your dad and what kind of health conditions he had in his genetic line compared to the mom. Because on
Wow.
the right side of the body is controlled by the left brain, which is, quote, the more logical and the more logistical, which is more related to the male DNA, and the right of the brain is controlling the left body. So you'd say, oh, right side's related to my male side, which means I get passionate about it. But when you have
Yeah.
the right side and you say, what's the breast have to do with this? You would then correlate it and say, okay, there is what we call the nursing or the nesting conflict in that female. I would guarantee 95% of those ladies basically would say there is a nursing conflict. Like you can't let people out of the nurse, or you didn't feel like you were nurtured
Yep.
by the male side of your life. I didn't
Right.
feel like I got fed. And then you go, and so that person will overproduce and tell their mammary glands to overproduce more milk because they have a nesting mechanism, because they don't want to do the same thing. They want to be the provider and nurse
Yeah.
everybody else. So they're signaling to their breast to overgrow. Now that's one aspect. And you can
Yeah.
see, and you look in that genetic line though, Jacqueline, you go, oh, their whole family line's like that. Isn't that
Yeah.
crazy? Yeah.
Crazy.
All
That's
right.
what
Sorry I went guys went
German,
down that
no,
trail though, you know?
German New Medicine said exactly that. Cause that, again, that's an area that we could have another episode dedicated to that. But yeah, that's a whole other area. But that explanation that you just gave is, yeah, I read that recently.
Yeah. It's so good, like how you can look at like, left and right brain stuff. And it's so good though. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Super
Um,
interesting.
yeah. It's like, isn't it good that you can like know what your emotions do, you know?
Yeah. But like with that too, Dr. Motley, I mean, everyone experiences, negative emotions and negative memories at some point in their life. So what like practices, you mentioned EFT before, which I'm a huge fan of, but what other practices or strategies can people employ to help them let go of those emotions? Because I think there's also a lot of fear, right, around repressed emotions and disease development because we are learning a lot more. So,
Mm-hmm.
we don't want to fear monger, but like, how do we really help people release these suppressed emotions?
There's a lot, like I love when I say EFT, I love like emotional freedom technique, and I think it's worked so well. I mean, if everybody out there listening, they say, what is that? It's like tapping the beginning and ending points of acupuncture points to
Yeah.
open up circulation of the electricity. EFT, I always try to keep it practical for the patient so that the people out there listening doesn't have to think they have to go find another doctor to do like NET. I do like neuroemotional techniques. There
Yeah.
are um, there's like neurological resetting, desensitization techniques. Um, but if anybody said it in a nutshell, what could actually help you feel really good that you can do at home? Literally, guys, I usually get a book, and it's on my bookshelf back here. It's like Acupressure Made Simple. This is what I would do, and people are like, "Do I have to take a cheat sheet?" No, I'm not saying it. Whatever emotion you're finding in your life. So this is what I would say: find a chart that has the Chinese medicine aspect of organ with emotions. So like if it's a heart, it's joy. If it's pancreas, it's worry. If it's stomach, it's worry. You find
Yeah.
out what you're experiencing. And then I find that acupressure book, and I tell my patients, go to the section of a book that says, how do I treat my stomach? And wear those acupressure points out. And I'm telling you, doing that will help you process your emotions. You don't think it will, but after a few weeks doing that, you're like, man, my anxiety is a lot lower. The other thing, and I hope this is practical for everybody, the other thing I always suggest is you ever seen those body bars? They're shaped like S's
Yep.
that you can do. People think they're just for back massage. Not at all. And Jacqueline, maybe you want to put this on your blog. I mean, whatever, you can, if not. But if you find good acupressure book, it's Acupressure Made Simple by Deborah Bleeker. For instance, if you go, okay, I worry all the time. Worry is associated with stomach. Go to the part of the book that says, oh, what acupressures help heal the stomach. Go to those points and work on those points, and that will help you process your emotions. You
Wow.
could think of the thing while you're doing that point. That's what EFT is trying to do, but you can go to those points and go, what makes me worry? go down the list. And what you'll notice is like talk therapy. Like you could say, I'm worried about my kids. And I'm guarantee you think about your kids, and the first thing that comes to your brain goes, okay, I got to make sure this. While you're thinking that, rub the point out, because there's a blockage from your nervous system to
Hmm.
your organ because you have created a blockage. All right. The next thing is taking that S bar and on your chart, look at the spine and organ relationship of the spine. You can do, it's called associated points in Chinese medicine.
Hmm.
Guys, you got to have everybody massage your back. In fact, half the time people are like, I just asked my husband to please just rub this point on my shoulder, but they can't do it right. And when I hit, they're like, that, can you please teach him? Teach him. That's it, right? You know, and I'm like, okay, relax. You're going to be okay. You take the S bar and you go down to that part. Hopefully you can reach it, like literally thoracic 7, 8. And people think it's too much work. You work that out, Jacqueline. It will help you process that emotion really well. And you're
Wow.
going to notice how tender that area is because so much input of that emotion is going into your spine. And your
Wow.
brain can't overtake it. It's overwhelming. And so you open it up and you start seeing people going, I still am worried, but it doesn't make me get as anxious anymore because you can have enough energy in your brain because you're taking care of the area of the spine. You're like, oh, I can handle it. I'm opening up. I can do
Yeah.
this. So I hope you guys take that into effect. Really look at the acupressure book and look at the area of the spine and use the body bar. I mean,
So
that's what
interesting.
I would do, honestly.
I'm getting those two things right after this conversation
Yeah.
ends, making a note on my Amazon account.
Yeah.
Super interesting. And the other thing too I love, Dr. Motley, is like we don't necessarily realize how tense we are until we go to a practitioner, right? Or go to an acupuncturist and they're feeling around and again, like we're used to it, right? We become
Yeah.
used to just being tense. And I had a really interesting experience where I had muscle testing done, which
Mm-hmm.
I never had ever in my life. And I just found that to be incredibly fascinating and insightful in terms of
Mm.
figuring out like blockages in your body. But yeah, it's just crazy. Even just little manipulations, and you do feel an emotional difference after.
You do. I mean, people think you want to make it like some of the techniques I use here. It's like when people think about getting a chiropractic adjustment or rubbing a point out. When I always suggest acupuncture as well. I mean, like that's going to
Right.
open up a lot. But when emotions are overwhelming, we have to remember that our bodies have adapted so well to the emotion that we will block as much information as we can to our cognitive thinking. Like we're just like, well, we got to deal with it and we'll just
Yeah.
shove it away. The beauty of it is like when you open it up, like you have somebody muscle test you and you hit a point and you like, they touch a point on your back or an acupuncture point. You're like, that's fire. And that's bringing me off the seat and it hurts. But when you open it up, you'll go, man, all this memory is flooding back. Like you have people that cry on the table and are like, I just remember da da da. It's like, why? It's like, all the information stored in that little area was not
Yeah.
reaching your brain to bring it to full cognition. It's okay. It's like, and I always tell people, it's all right. We'll do it step by step. And, using muscle testing and kinesiology and biofeedback. And it's funny because a person already knows, you already know when they tell you, you're like, yep, that bothers me a whole lot.
Guilty.
And I'm ticked off. I'm mad about
Yeah.
that. I get it. And you go, well, you let yourself feel it, but you didn't allow yourself to feel it enough to try to mend it
Right.
because you may have a worth issue like it. I don't have enough time to mend it.
Yeah.
So you have to go into those little intricacies. But I will say this though, like, okay, for instance, like I have, my whole family has heart stuff. Like my mom had a stroke. My dad's had mini stroke, heart attack stuff in the family. And one thing I use with the body bar, I want everybody to see, I personal experience. When my heart gets tired, does anybody out there get there? And I know when your heart gets tired and drawn and you're like, man, I'm using a lot of energy and I'm exhaustively using my energy to help people and myself. And I
Mm.
love doing it. But there comes a point sometimes when you lose direction, right? You lose passion. That's called the pilot light in Chinese medicine. They always say if you lose that, your heart chi, your blood is stagnant, your chi is stagnant in your heart. And the heart is not feeling comfortable putting that much energy out anymore. It's just like, I'm getting the same return for too much output. There's no yin and yang.
Huh.
The crazy thing is that people are not touched. Does that make sense? You just want somebody to come and rub your shoulders. Why? Because that's the area of the heart, the T1, T2. You just want somebody to put their hands on your shoulders and say, it's going to be okay. It's all right. And you're like, yes. And I'd almost break down and cry because somebody finally recognizes. But when you touch that point, that's the
Mm.
input, right? and you're like on that upper neck and right where your neck meets your shoulders. You're like, it is so sore. My neck hurts all the time. But the thing is, you want somebody to do it. But I'm saying, if you can't do that, you take that body bar and wear that area out, and it's going to be so tender, and you're going to be like, it may not be as good as somebody else putting their hands on me, but I'm going to put the yin in so I can get the yang back out.
So interesting. I love that. Yeah, I mean, the body keeps the score, right? And I think
That's
something
right.
that's really interesting is that people go to therapy, like talk therapy, right? And I mean, I don't know, Dr. Motley, I'm sure it's helpful for some folks, but I can't imagine just like going over the same issues over and over again with a therapist. Like, I can't really imagine how that could be helpful for the long run. But I think if you couple that with body work, right, just this whole conversation, everything we're talking about, that has
Yes.
really, really big implications.
Oh, it's truly, because the hard part is that, like, I mean, I know I've done talk therapy, and I'm not putting it down in any way. I'm just saying, like, with talk therapy, it's like, if you're trying to get it to where you let it out and they say it can make a change, because you don't want to keep amplifying the program that's set with the
Exactly.
word, right? But
Yeah.
if you open up the area of the spine or do acupressure, acupuncture, or tapping, what you are doing though is inputting more energy into that system, so you actually may have the to go do something about it.
Hmm.
Because if you keep talking about it, you're working at like a 50% battery. I'm like, no, if you could operate at 80 or 90%, you'd probably be like,
Yeah.
heavens, I shut down when my mom comes into play because it's too exhausting to work to talk to her. And then you're like, okay, now I'm like, I can do something about that. I can set this boundary up.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I think everybody out there is listening. Like, I guarantee you, everybody out there, Jacqueline's like going, oh, I know somebody out there. It's just
Yep.
like, and they're like, I need to do the tapping and I need to rub the point out when I'm thinking about them. But I'm like, that's what's needed though. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I'm with you.
exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, I couldn't agree more. It's funny too, and I think a lot of people tend to ignore symptoms their body might be bringing up because they're either A, scared, or again, B, they might just be used to it. But going back to the heart element, so you can't see it right now. I purposely wore a high t-shirt. I'm wearing one of those patch monitors because I just started to develop heart palpitations like 2 or so weeks ago. I have mitral valve prolapse, so I always get a little nervous. I'm like, oh, I'll just get an echo and just get checked out. But I've noticed that once the anxiety subsided, the heart palpitations stopped, right? And that's literally a prime example of psychosomatic. I mean, not
Yes.
psychosomatic, but the relationship between your emotions and, again, how your body reacts and responds,
Yeah.
specifically when it comes to the heart.
Oh,
So,
it's really, I've had, like, the one thing that got me when I had Lyme disease really, really bad is my heart palpitations would be so hard, and my heart felt like it was popping out of its chest.
yeah,
And I'm 32, 31, 32, and I'm like, oh, I'm just getting older. I'm like, no, your heart should not feel this way. But like, even in your case, like, with palpitation, with anxiety, I would always suggest too is, like, when you get testing done and they do more, just be like, be extensive, but don't be overwhelmed by getting tested for things that could go into the emotional heart space. So I would say for you, like, if you've, like, yeah, I've had Epstein-Barr and I've had Lyme and such and strep, those are the things that I would keep cleansing. But the
right.
anxiety portion is like, this is what I always say with the heart. This is why my heart's always been tired. It's because when I wake up in the morning, or if I'm going on, like, if you're thinking about your kids, right? Your brain, of course, is presupposing what's going to happen. Like, I've got to have this much energy to make it till 7 o'clock before I can get them slightly ready for bed. And your body for that day is trying to make an account going, man, do I have it? And that creates a lot of anxiety. And we want to create enough energy to the heart for the heart to go, I can make it, you know? And that's why I
Yeah.
like doing the points around that area. I'm telling you, Jacqueline, get that and
I'm
get those
excited.
points and
I'm
do
really
it. And
excited.
you just send me your number, and text me, and I'll tell you, you'll be surprised. You won't even, your heart palpitations, if they don't reduce to 80%
Yeah.
reduction, I'd be very surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super, super interesting. No, I'm excited to get it. Yeah. Again, little things like that you could just integrate to your day, change your
Mm-hmm.
whole life. Um, but going back, Dr. Motley, so you spoke about this a few times, parasites.
Mm.
This is a really hot topic. And I mean, I think there's a lot of confusion around it because there's a lot of misinformation, but you do such a great job of really just setting the tone for what parasites are, who should be doing a parasite detox. So for listeners out there who never even like heard of parasites in the context when it came to having them in their own bodies, what should they know? Let's just do like
uh,
Spark Notes 101.
yeah. 101. Everybody has parasites. You cannot be afraid of parasites. You're going to have them if you lived anywhere in the world. 101 is if you suffered from where you eat something and you continuously bloat up right after you eat, that's a clear sign that you have a parasite. If you continuously have mucus or foam in your poop and you have diarrhea that's pretty much consistent, you either got a bad bacteria or you pretty much have parasites. Chronic fatigue that is coupled with digestion is what I would suggest that you would have to really look into parasitic infection. And chronic heart conditions are something I really, really focus in with parasites. Now, with this, I want everybody to know that this is not for just people who did mission work or traveled overseas. But normally what I would find is that like a patient will have like a story in their life where they told me that they got sick right after a certain event. Like I had a patient I just saw her just a couple of days ago, and she said, "Oh yeah, I found evidence of frequency of Plasmodium, which is malaria parasite." But in her history, she did not indicate to me that she grew up in Fiji and been bit by tons of mosquitoes. Can you get malaria from mosquitoes? Yes. So what I want everybody out there to know is if you want to round in with your bare feet, you can get small little roundworms that go up into your feet, jump into your lungs, you cough it up, you swallow it, gets in your intestines, you poop it back out, cycle continues. You can get bit by flies or mosquitoes and get those infections. That's one. Could you get it from your pets? Yes, you could totally. I mean, there's spores that actually can get underneath the fingernails of your pets or on their fur, and then they get into your skin, and they're so small they can crawl into your skin. We're not trying to be scary.
Yeah.
But the one thing I always tell people, like, don't be afraid of parasites. There are many ways. Yes, I've seen roundworms that have come out that are 3 to 4 feet long in a patient. And a lot of people, practitioners out there, have had it. The importance of it, though, is that, back in the olden days, you'll hear a lot of reports. You see it on Instagram where they say we did deworming. And they say, well, we don't have it in this day and age. And that could be farthest from the truth, in my opinion. I've seen patients that have had it. But getting rid of parasites, because our food, depending on your food sources, is such a huge issue nowadays. Like, certain vegetables and fruits will carry lots of parasites, and greens will too, and even certain types of livestock. It is important that you keep your digestive system and like the actual acidic balance really, really balanced, pH, like alkaline and acidic, to eat up all the larvae and all the eggs and such. So if you're asking me like what is the importance and what is the 101, is that you have to realize that most people all have parasites. Is it a good idea to do a parasite cleanse twice a year? I think it is. I really do.
I was just going to ask you that.
Very much so. And in fact, if anybody out there has had chronic digestive system, like literally you've seen them people, like you go, man, I know people that said I've had diarrhea for almost 5 years straight. You need to get a parasite test. You can go to parasite.org, and they'll give you a home test and they even test for roundworms. And people say, well, what is the importance of that? Side note, you can go to sometimes cities and they will not test or use filtration for certain types of roundworms. They may go for the cysts, but they do not take into account the amount of helminthes or the amount of roundworms found in the water.
Wow.
I've had people come to me bringing me city reports that said, oh, we had huge amounts of the bacteria E. coli, but we also had Giardia, high amounts in our water sources, drinking it. And so
that's crazy.
Isn't it crazy? And then if you poop out and you find out, get on a good antiparasitic, Artemisia, Vidanga, black walnut, wormwood. But it is important, because you don't want those little critters to get into your blood and go up into the cranial area. I am not trying to be scary, guys. I'm just saying that those are possibilities. So that's 101. Do a cleanse. Try to do one twice a year.
So interesting. And does that protocol, Dr. Motley, overlap with what you might call like a detox cleanse? Like, is that something? Because again, detox, another really hot word people are throwing around for an otherwise healthy individual who may not be experiencing digestive issues or other symptoms. Like, how often should they be detoxing? And when I say detoxing, I mean, there's so many different things, right? There's coffee enemas, there's herbals. Like, what's your take on that?
I think when they get detox, it is a word used often. And I think I shy away from when patients, they have the best intentions. So if you guys are out there doing detox, no way am I talking bad about what you're doing. And I think it's great. But I think it's because they think, well, I'm feeling really bad right now, so I plan on doing a really good juice detox for a week and a half, and somehow it's going to reset my body from 8 months of living like horribly, or eating horribly.
They want the quick fix.
They do. And Is it overlapping with parasite? It doesn't necessarily overlap because parasites are smart.
Mm-hmm.
And parasites need certain types of herbs to actually get them out. Like I love coffee enemas. Don't get me wrong. I love them. I think that, but I've had patients that have done coffee enemas for 3 months, almost every day for 3 months, and finally hit a
Wow.
big batch of parasites in their liver, and their liver gets really large and, gets swollen because there's
Right.
parasites that were dug in so deep. Now,
Mm.
again, the quick fix is, can I do this in 2 weeks and get rid of that? But you know as well as I do. So anybody out there listening, what do I like detox? I do a system of methylation checking, which I do. Like my friend Dr. J Dunn has a really good website called Holistic Methylation with a W, Holistic Methylation. I'm not plugging
Mm.
her. I'm not saying getting any feet, kickback. But what happens is your body. I try to keep myself in a consistent basis of trying to strengthen my liver and my kidneys. Does that make sense? So in methylation, I take my gene report and I kind of get my ideas of like which nutrients I'm naturally deficient in. Like I don't do a lot of vitamin D production. I don't do a lot of good B assimilation, like
Mm-hmm.
MTHFR.
Yeah.
But all I have to say is you can do the detox, but the better way to do it is to get a gene report or find a functional medicine doctor that can actually help your liver and your kidney stay on a continuous balance, because you'll wear your body out doing a detox every so often. Because people think like I gained 16 pounds of inflammation weight, which is true. I get off dairy and don't eat the foods that inflame you. I get it.
Yeah.
But you're not necessarily going to repair your cells by doing a 2-week detox. Just be honest with you. You may clean out some things. And some people say, well, I do fasting. I love fasting. Not everybody needs to do it. So I'm not a big quick fix guy. My goal is I'm all about the journey. And I'm telling you what, people, in my opinion, do need to make a choice if it comes to health. It's like when people come to see me, they're like, well, how fast? And I'm like, it's a journey. It may take me a year, maybe a year and a
Yeah.
half to get you feeling 80% better. But with parasite cleansing, depending on how long the parasite's been and how many eggs they've laid, you need to do a little separate detox. So I
Yeah.
hope that answers the questions. I'm not about the quick fix. I think you should really just overall just work on well balancing and get a good functional medicine doctor
Yeah.
to keep you clean, and do those parasite cleanse twice a year.
No.
Do some coffee enemas. So
Yeah,
that was
that
a good
makes
answer.
sense. I couldn't agree more. Going back though to the gene mutations, I also have an MTHFR mutation. Do most people have that? I remember reading somewhere that most people actually do have that genetic
Yeah.
variation. And how do we, I mean, like supplementation wise, like how do we address that?
It's a good report, because I don't want everybody out there to think I have to get a gene report, where people say that's too much, because that's what they're going to say,
Yeah.
There's for everybody out there, think about like an MTHFR gene creates an enzyme that basically helps your body take folic acid, which you get from your greens and from your orange juice, break it down so that you can take the B12 out of your body, out of
Mm-hmm.
your food, and assimilate it to make carbon and hydrogen. That will help you with osteoporosis, autoimmune, cancer, histamine breakdown. So people say, do everybody have it? I've had some gnarly in THFR. My parents, thank you parents for giving me that. Appreciate that. I was the baby. I was the runt in the family, and I got the Lyme disease and all these things. Okay. But everybody usually has like maybe a double recessive MTHFR gene, but not everybody has it. I've seen
Yeah.
people with their gene reports come in and they've had pretty clean MTHFR, and they'll live a long time. But if they have like a vitamin D receptor gene that's off, they may feel sick the whole time. You're like, you're going to live for a long time, but you're not going to feel great, but no, not everybody has it. I think it's important if you're chronically sick to get a gene report and see if you do have MTHFR, because your body, for some reason, your parents' genetics were not geared to break down the B12 efficiently to make the carbon and hydrogen. And carbon and hydrogen is needed for all your cell activity.
Hmm.
So to answer that, I think anybody that's had Lyme disease, parasites, chronic strep, anybody that's just felt like even, breast explant illness, things like that, I would suspect they have MTHFR. And so you just have to be able to use your liver to detox properly. That's what methylation is in a nutshell. You got to utilize the
Yeah.
B12. And this is other signals. If you have MTHFR, so this is a big kicker. If you eat foods and your ears get real red and your hands get real red and you bloat really quick, or your pee is really yellow after you do anything with high amounts of vitamin B and you get the shakes, you pretty much have
Yeah.
MTHFR. So I'm just
Hmm.
letting you know. That's your
Interesting.
signals.
Interesting. I was going to ask you, what should people be looking out for?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Noted.
Like, people that tell you that, they'll go, man, every time I do a vitamin B, for crying out loud, like, I can't do it. I can't. I get the
Yeah.
shakes and I get it. Or anybody that tells you this, man, I stopped doing coffee. Can't do
Yeah.
coffee. I can do a little green tea. Is why? Because that's a CYP gene, but that has a lot to
Yep.
do with how you MTHFR. Is like, you need to get methylated check. You have to do that.
Yeah. I did a report, Dr. Motley. I don't know if you've heard of MaxGen Labs.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, my friend,
Yeah.
yeah, he does it. He's the guy who came up with it here. Yeah,
Oh,
Chad.
okay. See, there you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was so comprehensive, so in depth. I did that last year and it was incredibly insightful. I love how they provide descriptions too for you about like your body type. Like mine said I could have been an Olympic athlete because I had all of these like genetic variations. And I was like, I don't know if that's pretty accurate, but it was
Hey,
super insightful.
Chad did a great job when, like, it's like they, I need to get back on the Max Gene because they did a great job. Like, but it is true when you read a gene report,
Yeah.
you can find out like it's funny. Like, parents will bring their gene report in for their kid who has ADHD, OCD, and but before they even tell me that, and I'm not saying that's smart, it's just I've been trained in it. You can read the report and go, this kid's got this personality, right, and has this aggression trait, and they're like,
Right.
yes, you should have been an athlete. There are things I tell people. I'm like, dude, this person is meant to be highly intellectual and probably should have been in this type of world. And they're like, yeah, I was like, but they had the genetic variants that probably set them back. But it is cool because you kind of
Isn't it
you're like,
interesting?
maybe I
Yeah.
could have been an Olympic swimmer. And I'm
Sean
like,
Johnson.
yeah,
The next Sean
I mean,
Johnson.
yeah, if you could be like Sean, I'd be like, every time, like whenever she, like if I see her at Andrew, they're always like, she's just so strong. And I'm like, I'm
Yep.
not really a man. I'm a boy around them. You know what I mean? You just like,
Yeah.
God, like,
I love that.
I don't know. It's
No.
like, I give Andrew, her husband, a hug, and it's just like, you give him a hug and he's just so big. You're just like his shoulders, like two of me. You know what I mean? Like, it's just,
I know.
it's like,
I wonder what their MaxGen reports would look like.
oh, I mean, just probably just built strong muscles like their adrenal body types. Probably had the ability in their genes to create tons of testosterone, aldosterone. I mean, testosterone
Probably.
and adrenaline to meet the
Yeah.
demand. Yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
Crazy. So
Isn't it
interesting.
cool?
Yeah.
Gene
I'm a
reports.
huge I'm a huge fan of I mean, again, I think sometimes too much information overload could be a detriment, but I think it depends on, who's who's holding the information and how you're gonna use it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And you had to be like, and whatever you get a gene report, and I hope everybody knows, like, if I get passionate about saying these things, it's just know that I'm not trying to say go do all these testing, but I am passionate about like finding out about something, but don't get overwhelmed. Just take it take a good look at it, see what
Right.
you have, find a doctor that's not overwhelming and too excited, and just get somebody that's easy,
Yeah.
knows their stuff, and makes you feel comfortable.
Yep.
That's how you do well.
Yeah. So true. Couldn't
That's the
agree
key.
more. Yeah. And going back to herbals, Dr. Motley, do you find that in your practice you prescribe more herbal remedies over supplements? Because you deal with a lot of chronic infection, a lot of Lyme.
Yeah, I do. But because I know there's like a lot of people that disagree. So the functional medicine doctors out there love you. I mean, I have a lot of friends. I think over the years, like I've done a lot of genetic testing and I've done a lot of methylation checks with what I do. I just believe that there are herbs and there are spices that I think God put on this green earth to handle certain receptors in the body. So what I'm saying is that if I use more herbs because if you do go get a lot of genetic testing and methylation testing and such, you could be walking away taking 15 to 16 things at a time.
Right.
What I found that was most congruent with my patients was that I would find 2 to 3 really good herbs that resonated with them to clean up an infection. So one aspect of the health is like raise their vitamin D absorption and to raise their immune system to where they can fight. And I agree. I totally agree.
Hmm.
But there comes a point where it's like you have to make sure you take all the cofactors for that vitamin D so it keeps it active. So that person may be taking a lot of nutrients, right? This may not be the best path. That's how I do it. But I'll find if a person has certain herbs in with muscle testing or kinesiology or biofeedback, and I'll go, there's 3 or 4 herbs. And then when I do their methylation check, they only need a few things.
Hmm.
So I'm using the herbs like vitamins and minerals. I'm not saying to replace it, but a lot of them do have vitamin mineral type content with them, and they have different plant constituents that actually help basically heal the cells. So I would
Right.
rather, in my opinion, use more herbals to do that
Yep.
and then add in like the vitamins and minerals after. That's how I
Yeah.
do it. And so you finally usually see people that can knock down their dosage levels to many things by really starting off with herbs. That's my opinion. That's what I've seen. That's what I do every day in the office though.
That makes sense. What are your top 3 herbs for Lyme disease?
Japanese knotweed, cat's claw. There's a tie on this one too, but like I love Japanese knotweed, cat's claw, neem, which is Malia,
Mhm.
and hutanya, which is really good for Bartonella. So there's
Interesting.
probably more, but I think
Yeah.
I see. Oh, what am I saying? There's actually I got to add in black walnut. I'm not kidding.
Yep.
Black walnut's probably like one of my. I should have said that at the beginning. It's like my baby.
Black walnut.
I should have a black walnut farm and wherever I live in the future.
Interesting. Okay, I have to add that. I started taking a Japanese knotwood, but I know we don't have too much time left, but quick note. So I messaged you about this. I think that's how we first connected on Instagram.
Yeah.
I found out, well, I've had Lyme disease for the past decade or so
Mhm.
and wasn't treated acutely when I found out I had it because I just had antibodies to it. It was an old infection, and they say antibiotics only really work in the context of acute bites, right? Within like 30 days or so. So I've just had this for the past, 10 years. I've just had chronic fatigue, brain fog, all that fun stuff. But I did a pretty intensive and interesting Lyme protocol that consisted of hyperbaric oxygen, glutathione, IV artesunate, and a bunch of other
Oh
different,
wow.
yeah, and
Good
whole
job.
body hyperthermia. I did 2 sessions. I got to 107.6, which is the max they take you to. And I stayed awake for the first hour and a half, but I mean, you're monitored, like they have like you all
Everything
hooked up
on,
to
yeah.
everything. Yeah, and it was really interesting because just like the science behind it, how they say like Bartonella, I mean, specifically that strain is very heat sensitive and that it dies at, I think it's like 106.9. And then while I was doing that, I also had IV antibiotics. And I heard that like the heat also makes antibiotics work a lot more effectively.
Yep.
So it was really interesting, Dr. Motley. Again, like I mean,
No,
we'll see.
I
But
would do it in a heart. There's a patient of mine just sent me one about a patient who did that in Germany,
yeah,
and
St.
they have a lot.
George's.
Yeah, and it did really well. It knocked it out, and I'm all for it. I don't have like a thing in my heart that goes they can only do it this way or that way. Like not at all. I've had
Right.
patients that done hyperthermia, and I've had some that did different genetic therapy with it. But if you're right, like those infections they need to be burned out. They're so resistant
Mm-hmm.
that like when people come to me and they'll say like I've treated a lot of Lyme, but there comes a point too when I have a patient truly in my heart that I know that they need like extra, they need like deeper, and I'm like I can get 60% of this done. That's my motto. 60-70% I can get done. The
Yeah.
other part you have to do the hyperthermia. If you have to get that done, do it. I mean like you got to clean that stuff out of your blood. So kudos to you. I want
Thank
everybody
you.
out there like there's a few different places that use different light therapy that get down deep into the tissue,
Right.
and that's what I love about frequency medicine and
It's
different
so
alternative medicine.
interesting.
There's ways to clear it.
Yeah.
I've seen people go to clinics and make so that you just magnet therapy to use
Wow.
polarity of the body to actually activate certain cells in certain areas and kill off infections, and
So
done great.
interesting. So,
Like
so
they come back and
interesting.
I'm like, you did what? Oh, they put the
Right?
magnets here. Now, then I'm starting to use magnets, but I'm like, those people are the big dogs. I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know about that. I understand the
But
concept though.
yeah, and the thing I love, Dr. Motley, is like their program was so comprehensive and the way they pair everything, like the way they pair the IV antibiotics with the hyperthermia, then you follow it with the colonic the day after. Like it's just
Yep.
so structured. But I think it's that combination of therapies that makes everything so effective. I had chelation, like all things again I've never had in my life that I've read about. I
Yep.
had autohemofusion, which was
Oh
really
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. I never had that happen. Done that before. I haven't any markers, but I've had times where I think I had babesia toxicities a little bit right here, and so like I've been getting more, doing well, cleaning out a lot
Yeah,
more stuff. But I thought, yeah, man, I may go to their clinics
you
and
should
just have them do
try it.
tests and run it on me because if I do have it, I want to get it cleaned out.
Yeah.
Really have. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I'll message you. It was a little scary, but I think again, once you just do it and you realize how resilient your body is, and I mean, Hippocrates spoke about fever therapy like hundreds of years
Yeah.
ago. There's definitely something to it. So super
Oh yeah, I
interesting. But
embrace a
we'll
fever.
have an episode
When I have a
dedicated.
fever, yeah, we got to talk about fevers. I love it. I embrace them. I do a lot of
Yeah,
meditations with fever. Seriously, it really
100%.
works.
Yeah, and but my mom did hyperthermia treatments too for cancer. They didn't take her temperature as high, but I think for cancer patients they bring it to like 103.5 for about an hour.
Hmm.
But yeah, just so many interesting therapies that again we're only just tapping into right now. I mean,
It's just, and hopefully that it's not suppressed. Hopefully that they're allowed,
yeah.
and it's for the greater good. I'm with you.
Yeah,
It's good.
couldn't agree more. Well, Dr. Motley, again, I could spend hours chatting with you. So this is going to be one of many,
Oh,
hopefully, future episodes we'll have.
sure
But
thing.
I
Sure
do want to
thing.
be conscious of your time. Where can listeners follow you?
My feed is at Dr. Motley spelled out. Dr. Motley on Instagram, at Dr. Motley on YouTube and Facebook and TikTok. I got a TikTok, and so I'm trying to revamp my website because I really want to be user friendly. That's my goal today. I'm actually having a meeting about that because you get so used to like social media, you just want to make sure that all the platforms are satisfied. But that's where you'll find me, and I do a membership as well. But the membership's really about putting out like good live Q&As and for people who want a little bit more in depth.
That's
And
awesome.
that's where you'll find me. So if you guys need any extra information, I'm here to help. And hopefully, and I'm here at the office. So I'm in Franklin, Tennessee, or right outside Nashville. So if you ask where Motley's at, Motley's usually at the office working on people. So that's it.
I love it. Awesome. Well, I will include the links to all of those in the show notes. I will also be coming to pay you a visit at some point in the future. But
Do it.
my last question for you is what does being well and strong mean to you?
Being well and strong, that's a great question. Is people would say balance, but I would say that, of course, you want balance in the Chinese medicine world. I think personally, I'm just really analyzing myself, is to take all the guilt that you feel for not meeting everybody's expectations because the energy I put out to help everybody else feel better or feel happy or feel joyous. But realizing that if there's too much output in life, that I have to equalize the input.
Mm-hmm.
And not feel like I'm selfish, but realize I'm preserving myself to be the best form I could be. So the goal in the journey is to release the selfishness idea. And so, like, I'm doing this all for me. No, I'm actually doing it for you as well. So I'm saying that's what strong and balanced means to me, is because everything else can run off that.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm going to go do a beautiful workout. I'm going to go take a walk. And it's not selfish. So
Yeah.
that's my thought. Sorry to
I
get
love
too so
that.
introspective, but that's
That
how
was
I feel.
beautiful. No, that's why, Dr. Molly, that's why I love you and all your work is because there's just so much truth embedded. You're a philosopher at heart. I think you are.
I've had some people tell me that.
When's the book
Maybe.
coming? Well,
I've had some people. Yeah, it's really funny you mentioned that. Some people have asked me about that. So
all right. So when you publish it, we'll have you back on.
I'll let you know.
All right, Dr. Motley. Well, thank you again. I'm super excited to share this with listeners. And yeah, I hope to meet you at some point soon.
Yeah, I definitely. Let me know when you come into town. We'll set it up. It'd be great.
Awesome.
All right.